My name is Lisa, and I work as a manager in a big hotel. My job keeps me busy, but I love it. I meet people from all over the world, solve problems, and ensure everything runs smoothly. But this story isn't about my work. It's about something that happened one night, a night I will never forget. It all started when I boarded a late-night flight to Miami. I had been visiting my grandmother who wasn't feeling well. After saying goodbye, I hurried to the airport, my heart heavy with worry about her health. The airport was crowded as usual. People rushing, announcements echoing, and suitcases rolling noisily. I wasn't paying much attention to anyone around me until I reached the check-in counter. That's where I first saw him, a man with striking blue eyes and a calm, confident smile. "Heading to Miami, too?" he asked, his voice smooth and friendly. I nodded, managing a small smile. "Yes, late-night flights aren't my favorite, though." He chuckled. "Same here. But sometimes we don't have a choice, right?" We exchanged a few polite words before parting ways. I didn't think much of him at the time. He seemed like just another passenger trying to pass the time. When I finally boarded the plane, I was exhausted. All I wanted was to close my eyes and sleep through the flight. But as fate would have it, guess who ended up sitting right next to me? Yes, it was him, the blue-eyed man from the check-in counter. "Looks like we're travel buddies now," he said with a charming grin. I laughed nervously. "Small world, I guess." He introduced himself as Jackson. "But you can call me Jack," he said. We started chatting. At first, it was casual, about work, travel, and life in general. He was funny, intelligent, and easy to talk to. For a moment, I forgot about my worries and even felt relaxed. But then, things took a turn. As the plane took off and the seatbelt signs went off, Jackson leaned closer. His tone shifted, becoming serious. "Lisa," he said, "this isn't just a coincidence." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but this time it wasn't the warm, friendly smile I had seen earlier. It was cold, calculated. "I've been watching you, Lisa," he said quietly. "I know who you are, and I know what you do." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Jackson didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a small photo from his pocket and slid it toward me. My breath caught. It was a picture of my father. What is this?" I stammered. Jackson's eyes locked onto mine. "It's simple, Lisa. I need you to make a call. You're going to help me, or something very bad will happen to your father." My mind raced. My father? How did he know about him? And what did he want me to do? "I don't understand," I whispered. "What call? What are you asking me to do?" Jackson leaned even closer, his voice calm but firm. "There's a man staying at your hotel. His name is Charles Keith. He's an important government official. Tomorrow morning he has a big meeting. I need you to call your hotel and have him moved to a different room, a specific room." I shook my head, panic rising in my chest. "I can't do that. Why would I?" Jackson cut me off. "Because if you don't, my associate, who's sitting outside your father's house right now, will make sure he doesn't see tomorrow." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My father's life was in danger, and I was trapped thousands of feet in the air with no way to escape. I tried to stay calm. "You can't do this," I said, my voice trembling. "You're asking me to help you hurt someone." Jackson's expression didn't change. "I'm not asking, Lisa, I'm telling you. Make the call." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I couldn't let him see my fear. "Why me? Why did you choose me?" He shrugged. "Because you're the perfect person for the job. You have access and you can make things happen without raising suspicion. Now stop wasting time. Do what I say." I looked around the plane, hoping someone would notice something was wrong. But everyone was busy with their own lives, reading, watching movies, or sleeping. No one paid attention to the quiet conversation happening in row 12. Desperation filled me. I needed to think, to find a way out of this nightmare. But Jackson was watching my every move, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "Lisa," he said, his tone warning, "if you're thinking of doing something stupid, don't. Remember, your father doesn't have much time." I clenched my fists under the table. He had all the control and I hated it, but I couldn't let him hurt my dad. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to speak. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll do it. I'll make the call." Jackson's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good choice," he said. He handed me a small phone. "Call the hotel and ask for Cynthia. She's your assistant manager, right? Tell her to move Keefe to room 408. That's all you need to do." I took the phone with shaking hands. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to find another way. But my father's face flashed in my mind and I knew I had no choice. Dialing the number, I prayed silently for a miracle. "Hello, this is the Lux Atlantic Hotel," Cynthia's familiar voice answered. "It's me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you to move Charles Keefe to room 408. It's important." There was a pause on the other end. "Room 408? But that's—" "Just do it, Cynthia," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I felt. "Trust me, it's urgent." Cynthia hesitated but finally agreed. "All right, I'll take care of it." As I hung up, Jackson gave me a nod of approval. "See, that wasn't so hard, but inside my heart was breaking. I had just put an innocent man's life at risk to save my father. And the worst part? I had no idea what Jackson's real plan was, or how far he would go. As the plane continued its journey through the dark night, I realized this was only the beginning. I was trapped in a deadly game, and I didn't know the rules. As the plane hummed steadily through the night sky, I sat frozen in my seat. The phone felt heavy in my hands, as if it carried the weight of the terrible decision I had just made. Jackson leaned back, his demeanor calm and confident. It was like he had done this 100 times before. "You did well, Lisa," he said, his voice low but smug. "Now just sit tight and enjoy the rest of the flight." Enjoy. The word rang in my ears. How could I possibly enjoy everything I believed in? But my mind didn't stop working. I couldn't just give in. I had to think of a way to stop this, to save my dad, and to protect Mr. Keefe. I glanced around the cabin. Passengers were either asleep or engrossed in their in-flight entertainment. The flight attendants walked up and down the aisle, oblivious to the silent battle happening in row 12. Then an idea struck me. It was risky, but I had no other choice. I turned to Jackson, trying to sound calm. "I need to use the restroom," I said. Jackson raised an eyebrow, his blue eyes studying me carefully. Do you? Yes, I replied, keeping my tone steady. Or do you plan to monitor that too? He smirked and gestured toward the aisle. Go ahead, but don't try anything foolish, Lisa. Remember, I'm watching. I nodded and stood up, my legs trembling as I made my way toward the restroom. I could feel Jackson's eyes on me the entire time. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The tiny space felt claustrophobic, but I couldn't waste time. I pulled out the small phone Jackson had given me and stared at it. Could I call for help? Could I warn someone about what was happening? I hesitated, fear gripping me. What if Jackson found out? What if he had someone listening? But then I thought of my father, and how he always told me to be strong, no matter what. Taking a deep breath, I dialed 911. The operator answered quickly. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered into the phone, my voice barely audible. I'm on a flight to Miami. Someone is threatening me and my family. Please send help. The operator tried to ask questions, but I couldn't stay on the line. I ended the call quickly and hid the phone in my pocket. My heart raced as I unlocked the door and stepped out. Jackson was waiting for me in the aisle, his arms crossed. You took your time, he said, his tone light but with an edge of suspicion. I forced a smile. The food on these flights doesn't always agree with me. He narrowed his eyes but didn't push further. Let's get back to our seats. As we sat down, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. If the authorities intercepted the flight, I might still have a chance to stop Jackson's plan. But for now, I had to act normal. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Jackson kept a casual conversation going, as if we were old friends chatting about life, but his eyes betrayed his calm demeanor. They were sharp, always watching me. Suddenly, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we'll be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and follow the crew's instructions. My heart leapt. This had to be it. The authorities were on to Jackson, but he didn't seem fazed. Instead, he leaned closer to me and whispered, I hope you didn't just do something stupid, Lisa. If I find out you did, your father won't live to see sunrise. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my expression neutral. Why would I do anything? You're the one holding all the cards. Jackson studied me for a moment before leaning back. Good. Let's keep it that way. The plane began its descent, and I could feel the tension in the air. Passengers were murmuring, confused about the sudden change in plans. As we landed, the cabin doors opened, and a group of uniformed officers boarded the plane. My heart raced as they moved down the aisle, their eyes scanning each row. When they reached us, Jackson's calm demeanor finally cracked. His jaw tightened and his body tensed. Is there a problem, officer? He asked, his voice smooth but with a hint of irritation. One of the officers gestured toward him. Sir, we need you to come with us. Jackson glanced at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he lunged. Everything happened so fast. Jackson grabbed me, pulling me into a chokehold. Passengers screamed as chaos erupted in the cabin. "Stay back!" Jackson yelled, his voice filled with menace. "Nobody moves or she dies." The officers froze, their weapons drawn but unable to act. My mind raced as I struggled against Jackson's grip. "Jackson, stop!" I gasped. "He don't have to do this," but he wasn't listening. He dragged me toward the emergency exit, his grip like iron. The officers followed cautiously, trying to de-escalate the situation, but Jackson was relentless. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with anger. "This isn't over, Lisa. Not by a long shot." As he reached for the emergency exit handle, I knew I had to act. Summoning every ounce of strength, I elbowed him in the ribs. He stumbled, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. The officer seized the moment, tackling Jackson to the ground. Passengers cheered as the nightmare finally came to an end. I sat down, trembling, as the officers restrained Jackson and escorted him off the plane. One of the officers approached me, his expression kind. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm fine, thank you." As the plane prepared to continue its journey, I leaned back in my seat, exhausted but relieved. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. As the plane resumed its journey, the cabin buzzed with murmurs of relief and disbelief. Passengers whispered among themselves, casting glances my way. I tried to calm my racing heart, but the events had left me shaken. The officers had escorted Jackson off the flight, but his parting words echoed in my mind. "This isn't over, Lisa." I couldn't help but wonder if he was bluffing. Was he truly out of my life now, or had he planned something more sinister? The flight attendants offered me water and assured me everything was under control, but as I looked out of the window, the city lights below seemed cold and distant. "Miss!" A voice interrupted my thoughts. It was one of the officers who had remained on the flight. His expression was firm but kind. "We're keeping you safe until you reach Miami, but we need to know, did Jackson mention anyone else working with him?" I hesitated. "He said something about an associate watching my father," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded, his jaw tightening. "We'll have local authorities check on your father immediately, but you need to stay alert. These people don't give up easily." I swallowed hard and nodded. Deep down, I knew he was right. The rest of the flight passed in a tense silence. My mind replayed every moment, every word Jackson had said. Who was his associate? Was my father truly safe now? When we finally landed in Miami, the airport was alive with chaos. Flashing lights, reporters, and security personnel filled the terminal. The officers escorted me through the crowd, shielding me from the cameras and questions. As we reached a quieter area, my phone buzzed. I fumbled to answer it, my hand still trembling. "Lisa?" It was my father's voice. Relief washed over me. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I'm fine, sweetheart. The police are here. They said someone was watching the house, but they've taken care of it." "What's going on?" I explained everything in brief, my voice shaking with emotion. My father tried to comfort me, but I could hear the worry in his tone. "Just come home safe, Lisa," he said softly. "I will, Dad," I promised. But as I ended the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Jackson might have been captured, but his network, his plan, was still out there. I was escorted to a secure vehicle waiting outside the airport. As the car pulled away, I tried to relax, but my instincts told me to stay on guard. The streets of Miami blurred past the window. My destination was clear. I had to get to the Lux Atlantic Hotel. Charles Keefe was still in danger, and I needed to undo the damage I'd done under Jackson's threats. As we approached the hotel, I saw police cars parked outside. Officers were speaking to the hotel staff, and the atmosphere was tense. Inside, I rushed to the front desk, where Cynthia stood, her face pale and worried. "Lisa, what's going on?" "The police are here, and they're asking about Keefe's room change," she said. I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's a long story, Cynthia, but listen to me. We need to move Keefe back to his original room right now." Her eyes widened. But why? Is he in danger?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Just trust me on this." Cynthia nodded and picked up the phone to contact the security team. As I waited, my heart pounded. Had I acted in time? Or had Jackson's plan already been set in motion? Moments later, Keefe was moved to a secure area within the hotel. The police took over, ensuring no one unauthorized could get near him. But just as I began to feel a sense of relief, an officer approached me. His face was grim. "Lisa, we've intercepted a message," he said. "It seems Jackson's associate is still nearby. They're targeting this hotel." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? How close are they?" "We don't know yet," he admitted, "but we need to evacuate everyone immediately." The hotel staff sprang into action, guiding guests out of the building. I stayed close to the officers, my mind racing, and then it happened. A loud explosion rocked the lobby, sending debris flying. I was thrown to the ground, the noise ringing in my ears. When I opened my eyes, the scene was chaos. Smoke filled the air, and people were screaming. I struggled to my feet, coughing, and looked around for Cynthia. "Lisa!" someone called. It was one of the officers, pulling me toward the exit. "Keefe!" I shouted. "Is he safe?" The officer nodded. "He's been moved to a secure location, but we need to get you out of here." As we reached the outside, I saw fire trucks and ambulances rushing to the scene. My legs felt weak, but I knew this wasn't the end. I turned to the officer. "Jackson may be behind bars, but someone else is pulling the strings. We need to find them before it's too late." The officer nodded, determination in his eyes. "We will, but first you need to rest. You've been through enough." I looked back at the burning hotel, my heart heavy. Jackson's words echoed in my mind. This isn't over, and I knew he was right. The fight wasn't over yet. The chaos outside the hotel was overwhelming. Red and blue lights flashed across the dark Miami streets, and the air was filled with the sounds of sirens, panicked voices, and the crackle of a distant fire. I sat on the curb, shaking, as paramedics checked the bruises on my arm. Jackson's words echoed in my head. This isn't over. Even though he was in custody, his plan was still unfolding. Somewhere out there, his associate was watching, waiting to strike. An officer approached me, his face etched with worry. "Lisa, we've secured Charles Keefe. He's unharmed and being transported to a safe house. But we need to talk. We believe Jackson's associate may be targeting you now." I froze. "Me? Why?" The officer crouched beside me. Because you're the one who disrupted their plan. They may see you as a loose end. The weight of his words hit me like a punch. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was a target. "I can't go home," I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. The officer nodded. "We'll take you to a safe location. But first, we need to find out everything Jackson told you, anything that could help us stop this." I closed my eyes, replaying the nightmare in my mind. Jackson had been so calm, so confident. He'd mentioned an associate, someone watching my father, but he never gave a name. "Check his phone," I said suddenly, my voice steady despite the fear. "He had a phone with him on the plane. Maybe it has something." The officer's face lit up. "We're already on it. If there's a lead, we'll find it." They ushered me into a secure vehicle, and we drove through the quiet streets. The city lights blurred past the window, but my mind was miles away. I thought about my father, safe but shaken. I thought about Charles Keefe, whose life was spared because I'd acted in time. And I thought about Jackson, how someone so charming could be so dangerous. But most of all, I thought about how this had to end. When we reached the safe house, it was eerily quiet. A team of officers stood guard outside, their expressions tense. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. "Lisa," one of the officers said, "we've recovered data from Jackson's phone. There's a text chain with his associate, but the messages are coded. We're working to decode them now." I nodded, exhaustion tugging at me. "How long will it take?" "Not long," he assured me. "In the meantime, get some rest. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt hollow. I lay on the small cot in the corner of the room, but sleep wouldn't come. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. I was trapped in a waking nightmare. Hours passed, and just as the first rays of dawn broke through the window, there was a knock on the door. "Lisa," the officer said, his face grim. "We've decoded the messages." I sat up, my heart pounding. "What do they say?" He hesitated before answering. The associate was planning a secondary attack. Jackson was only a distraction. The real target wasn't Keefe. It was the safe house where we moved him. My blood ran cold. "What? You need to warn them." "We already have," he said quickly. "But, Lisa, there's more. One of the messages mentions your name. The associate knows you're here." Before I could respond, the sound of screeching tires echoed outside. The officer's hand went to his radio. "We've got movement," he said, his voice tense. I moved toward the window, peeking out cautiously. A black SUV had pulled up, and a man in a dark jacket stepped out. Even from a distance, I could feel his menacing presence. "It's him," I whispered. "It has to be." The officer sprang into action, securing the doors and windows. The man outside didn't flinch. He stood there, as if daring us to make the first move. The standoff didn't last long. With a sudden burst of motion, the man pulled out a weapon and fired at the house. Glass shattered, and I ducked, my heart pounding. "Get down," one of the officers shouted, pulling me behind a heavy desk. The next few minutes were a blur of gunfire, shouting, and chaos. The safe house, meant to protect me, had turned into a battleground. But I couldn't just sit there. I had spent the last 24 hours being scared, being controlled. Not anymore. I crawled toward the officer who had been protecting me. "Give me something," I said, my voice shaking but determined. He hesitated, then handed me a small can of pepper spray. "Stay low and stay safe," he said firmly. But I had other plans. As the gunfire slowed, I peeked out from behind the desk. The man was moving toward the house, his weapon raised. He was focused on the officers at the front, unaware of me creeping toward the side door. My hands trembled as I gripped the pepper spray. I waited until he was close enough that I could see the cold determination in his eyes. Then I sprang. I sprayed him directly in the face, and he let out a furious roar, dropping his weapon. The officers seized the moment, tackling him to the ground and restraining him. It was over. I collapsed to the floor, my body shaking with relief. The man was hauled away, and the officers surrounded me, their faces a mix of admiration and concern. "You're braver than you think, Lisa," one of them said. I managed a weak smile. I just want this to end, and finally it did. In the days that followed, Jackson and his associate were charged and locked away for good. Charles Keefe thanked me personally for helping save his life, though I still felt guilty for being part of the plan, even under duress. My father hugged me tightly when I returned home, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You're stronger than I ever realized," he said. Life slowly returned to normal, but I was forever changed. I learned that fear doesn't have to control you, that even in the darkest moments, you can find strength you never knew you had. And as I stood by my window one evening, watching the sun set, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone take my power away again. If you liked my story, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.